Hello Year 10, and this is an exciting day today because this is the final lesson of the topic B7. Now, as I explained to you in a post on Show My Homework, once we've done this topic, we're going to do a bit of revision for this topic. We'll do some educate questions, and then we will move on to revising paper 1 topics, which is B1 all the way through to B4, so that we've got some decent revision done. We've actually done now every topic apart from B5, which we intend to cover at the beginning of Year 11. So we are in a fantastic position in terms of our progression through this topic, through the whole biology course, and indeed preparing for our paper 1 mocks when we get back to school. So let's get on with this then. It's our final lesson, B7. And we previously, last lesson, we looked at that intensive farming versus free range farming and the ethics behind it, the benefits to the farmers and the detrimental impact to the animals themselves, and what can be done to make that a little bit easier for them. Okay, so we did look at both sides of the story. We're going to start off with a quick 6 marker. Okay, give methods used in the factory farming of animals. Explain the advantages and the disadvantages of these methods. Now, a really key word here is explain. Okay, that's going to come up in the mark scheme. We need to explain those advantages and disadvantages. So it's a 6 marker, 6 minutes. You know what I'm going to say. It's time to pause now. Okay, hopefully we've given that a good go. Maybe we've got 3 advantages, 3 disadvantages. Let's take a look at the mark scheme. Now, at the beginning of the mark scheme, we don't tend to show you this bit because it's not the most exciting, but this is our kind of intro to a 6 marker, sometimes given for 4 markers as well, which gives us this understanding of how we mark your answers, okay? So for 5 to 6 marks, there is a description of factory farming methods, and both the advantages and disadvantages have been explained. Okay, so it's about explaining them, not just describing them. Okay, let's take a look. So, examples of biological points made in the response. Factory farming, for example, the cramped conditions. We talked about the gestation crates, the battery hens, calf crates, pig barns. We didn't talk about fish tanks actually, but we are going to talk about sustainable fishing in this lesson. Controlling temperature and heating so that they're not using lots of energy to maintain body temperature. Controlling feeding, so they're all given their specific rationing of food. Whereas if they were free to roam, then there might be a kind of imbalance in the amount of food that they get. Controlling the lighting, so helps to control their, when they're asleep and when they're awake. And antibiotics, these are prophylactic antibiotics. We've not talked about this, not a massive point, but it just stops infections from spreading, okay? So there are more points now, so that's the kind of the method, what it's like, and then the advantages and the disadvantages. So advantages for the farmer is that it's efficient, there's greater profit margins, more food produced, therefore they can sell it for a cheaper price. You've got fast growth because more energy is put into growing. We saw those pig pie charts last lesson. They can have more livestock in a smaller area. Less energy is lost through movement, keeping warm. Okay, so all of that energy goes into growth. The food is high in calories, so the animals will grow faster, or the chickens may lay more eggs. Easier to vaccinate the animals because they're in a confined space. It's easy to kind of monitor their medical needs. Easier to protect them from predators because they're trapped. And those antibiotic treatments to stop infection. So notice how each point has got kind of it's a point, and then it's saying why that's good. Okay, so it's not just protecting animals, it's protecting animals from predators. It's not just giving them antibiotics, it's to stop infections. Okay, there's more livestock because there's less space. Sorry, no, there's less, even though they've got less space, they've got more of them in that space. Forgive me. Okay, Disadvantages: stress, cruelty, inhumane, unethical, animal rights, all those sorts of things. They've got restricted movement, they're overcrowded, faster spread of disease because they're all next to each other. Antibiotics in the food chain could be bad. We could get that accumulation. We talked about bioaccumulation in our food chain lesson. We talked about how it can increase and intensify through a food chain. Wasting fossil fuels, that goes in with the heating the environment so that they use less energy in keeping warm. Pollution from the animal waste. We saw, or we have seen, when we watched Animal Farm actually, we saw about the pollution that comes from pig waste, pig feces, and they, on one of the episodes of Animal Farm, which is in the playlist for B6, I think. So if you look in that playlist, you can see the Animal Farm. There's one episode and then there's all 3 episodes all back to back in one long thing, and you can see about how they put something into the food that they fed to pigs, and it actually made their waste more eco-friendly. They called them eco-pigs. Another point, just trying to cross-link to another topic. Okay, so if you need extra time to do your green penning, then pause now. Sustainable fishing then. So we're going to have a look at 4 graphs, and we're just going to see which is the most suitable fish to eat in 2015 and why. Okay, so 2015 isn't on the graph. Notice a really important point for each of these 4 graphs is that they all have different scales. Okay, so the top left, we've got the cod there. The top of the scale there is 300 and each bar is 50. And each bar on the haddock, which is top right, is 200. Each bar on the herring, which is bottom left, is 500, okay? And for the saithe, it is 100. So we've got different scales, really hard to compare this data. Each of those dashed lines is the precautionary limit. This is the limit by which if the numbers of fish of that particular species go below that limit, it is unlikely to become, it's no longer a sustainable fishery. Basically, the numbers are gonna wipe out unless something's done to stop it. Now, the best thing I can suggest at this point in time is to rack your brain and think about, or even have a look at this. They always seem to be on some Sky channel somewhere, and that is Deadliest Catch. Okay, it's a fishing program. Sounds a bit dull, but actually it's quite good. Just watch one episode. They always talk about the same things. They fish for things like king crab and stuff like this, and you've got all these fishing boats that go out. They have a license. They can only fish in a certain window of time, and the season starts and then it ends, and sometimes that's only a weekend. They've got different areas that they can go to or can't go to. They've got rules about how they fish, the net sizes that they use, throwing back in the fish that are only juvenile, that means young, so that they've still got time to breed. There's so many different rules that they put in place to enable sustainable fishing. Okay, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. But for now, let's look at these graphs then. So which is the most sustainable fish to eat in 2015 and why? You've got to have a thinking time on this one, okay, and start writing down which one you think it might be, or maybe which 2 might it be, and why. I think what I'm going to start off by doing is saying which it can't be. Okay, it can't be cod. And actually, if you look at the packaging on, maybe in the freezer you've got some fish fingers or something, not usually cod, okay? It's usually pollock because that's widely available, okay? So cod numbers have decreased dramatically there, below the precautionary limit back in the 80s. And although there have been some peaks and troughs, never really come back over that precautionary limit. So cod is out the window, okay? Herring's had some big impacts, okay? You need quite a lot of herring in order to stay above the precautionary limit. Looking at that graph, it's about 1,300, and that's in 1,000 tonnes. So that's actually 1.3 million tonnes. So we need a lot there. We've done some big troughs again in the 70s and 80s below that precautionary limit line. Clearly something's been put in place, some of those rules that we just talked about, to increase back up to the precautionary limit. We went above it and then just dropped below it again, but it looks like it's picking up. So that could be an option, and numbers are high, okay? So yes, okay, they've got a high precautionary limit, but numbers are high, which means there's lots of them, so there's more chance for breeding in the future, you see. Let's take a look at the haddock. Haddock, pretty much all the time, stays above the precautionary limit, okay? It's the best one at staying above the precautionary limit. But in terms of how low that precautionary limit is, it's very low. So it means that, yes, they're kind of coping and managing, but the numbers are still pretty low, okay? And then if we look at the Saith, we can see that there was a decline in the 90s, again 80s into the 90s, and now it's back up over that precautionary limit. So which one would we choose to eat as being the most sustainable? I would say either the haddock or the Saith, for the reasons that we have talked about. But there's lots of aspects that we can bring into it. The fact that they each have different precautionary limits. Is it good that they've got a precautionary limit is really high numbers, or is it actually good if it's a high number one because there's more chance of reproducing? Is it that we're looking for something that constantly stays over the precautionary limit? Depending on how we want to analyse that data is really going to massively affect our answer. Okay, if you need extra time on this question, just to write some notes, okay? Sometimes they ask us some really strange things with exam questions. It might not be that there is one specific answer. Could be that there's maybe a couple, as in this example here, that are, you know, possible answers, and it's really important to get your reasoning in there, okay? Why do you think that? Okay, if you need extra time, pause now. Okay, so I started talking about methods that are used to help fish stocks recover. I talked about watching Deadliest Catch. So easy to get the ideas from there. There is a link to a YouTube video at the top there, and that's quite a nice little video. If you go into the Year 10, I think it's called Year 10 Triple Distance Learning folder in my YouTube channel, then you will see the sustainable fishery video there. It's got quite nice music to it. It's looking at sustainable fishing across the world, so take a look at that one. And what methods are used to help fish stocks recover? Think about the things I talked about. Try and get your little bullet point list, okay? So I'll give you a bit of time to think about that. If you need some extra time for that, pause now. Okay, so things we talked about to enable sustainable fishing. We said that you might need to have a license. Add these points in to your own writing. So you might need a license. There might be a fishing window. So it might be that there are specific restricted times that you can fish. It might be that once you have filled your boat, that's it. You've taken your allocated supply of fish and therefore you are done. It might be that you have to have particular fishing nets with a particular size hole so that the smaller juvenile fish can escape. And it might be that even when you bring those on board, and you'll see it with the king crabs, they measure them, and if they are too small, then they throw them back in so that they can continue to reproduce. What else might they do? So we talked about license, net size, throwing the juveniles in, particular fishing window, filling your boat. I think that's probably a pretty good list there. We only had 4 points to find. I think I found 5 there. Okay, if you need some extra time or you want to kind of quickly rewind that part of the video and listen again to collect those ideas, that's absolutely fine. And pause now. Okay, let's move on. So we're now looking at, remember, all of the last part of this topic is about this huge human population We've kind of had our issues with biodiversity. We're trying to maintain those. We're now trying to sustainably feed everybody on the planet. So we've got GM crops here. We've talked about GM before. We talked about it back in B6. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. We talked about using enzymes to cut out a gene and then replace it with an additional gene, not swapping it, but adding in an additional gene from one plant. So say, for example, disease resistance. Okay, we find that one plant is resistant to a particular disease. We use enzymes and we cut that gene out of the plant that is disease resistant. We put it into our crop and our crop should become disease resistant. So that was one way we can increase food production. Organic food does not work like this. Organic food has no chemical sprays, no fertilizers, no pesticides, no genetic modification. That's why it tends to be more expensive, because it's produced in smaller quantities, because you don't get the high crop yields, but you get much higher crop yields with genetically modified food. So it's a way of providing more food for this growing population. If you need any extra time on that slide, then pause now. Okay, so here we've got our pest and frost resistance. Okay, increasing the yield, we've talked about that. I think we can whiz past that one quite quickly. And this is our final part to talk about. This is mycoprotein. Okay, I would give you this sheet, but I think probably we can just kind of take a double page in our book and just kind of create it just as easily. Equally, at the end of this lesson, I've got it summarised with all the answers in. If you wanted to just take a quick screenshot of that and put it into your book in that way, then that's just as good. Okay, so we're looking at how mycoprotein is made. This we would know as corn. Okay, so you've got like your vegetarian alternative protein substitute. It's you've got your corn sausages, your corn burgers, your corn mince, whatever it is, the stuff that looks like bacon that's not bacon. Okay, we call it corn, but that's like saying, do you want a Kleenex rather than do you want a tissue? The actual product itself is mycoprotein. Okay, a brand name example is corn. Okay, so in an exam situation, we really want to be using the phrase mycoprotein rather than corn. Okay, I don't mean corn with a C, I mean the Q-U, I don't know how to spell it, Q-U-O-R-N, corn, but we're going to say mycoprotein. Okay, and it's made in this giant fermenter. Okay, I'm going to go through those stages of how it's made, and then this page here is our summary that's going to be with all of the correct answers on at the end, so you can map it out now. If you want to pause it now, you can map it out and then we'll go through it, and you could add as we go. You could just listen to everything and then just get the details at the end. I really don't mind. Okay, if you are drawing it out and you need extra time, then pause now. Okay, here we are. So this is a giant fermenter. It's been sterilised, so it's all clean. And this is something called a batch process. This process lasts about 6 weeks. So in the factory, they will have them all started at staggered times. So they're always collecting all of this mycoprotein. Maybe, every couple of days they start a new one up. And so every couple of days they're collecting mycoprotein. And if you remember, we talked about that anaerobic digester. We said that was a continuous process and it was anaerobic. This one is a batch process and it's aerobic. So we're supplying oxygen to this fermenter. So it's aerobic and it is batch. Now, the mycoprotein is produced by a fungus called Fusarium. Fusarium will get you 1 mark in the exam for bringing up this word Fusarium. Okay, that's the name of the fungus that produces the mycoprotein. Okay, so let's follow through then. We've got our fermenter and we've sterilised it. Okay, we're now adding into that glucose syrup, okay, so it's full of that glucose which is needed for the fusarium to respire aerobically, okay, so it's using, remember, aerobic respiration uses glucose and it uses oxygen, so the glucose there has been provided for the fusarium to respire, okay, so we've got the glucose syrup in there. Again, if you want to draw this picture and annotate around it, perfectly okay. You might want to keep pausing at different points. I'm going to move on to the next part now, so if you need to pause, pause now. Okay, second thing that happens then, because we've got aerobic respiration, we need to supply some oxygen, and that is supplied in the form of filtered air. There's also ammonia going in there. Now, ammonia has in it nitrogen, and that nitrogen is going to build up into amino acids, and then the amino acids can build up into protein, and we're making mycoprotein. Okay, so the nitrogen from the ammonia is going to go into building amino acids, which will then go into building the protein, and that's done by the fusarium. It's done by that fungus. Okay, so the fungal cells respire aerobically using that filtered air to provide oxygen and ammonia to provide the nitrogen to make those amino acids and make the protein. If you need to pause, pause now. Okay, so adding air makes the broth less dense, okay, it's kind of aerated, it circulates around. You've got that heater there at the bottom to maintain the temperature, and we kind of get this kind of convection current scenario going on where you've got this bubbled gas going in here, we've got the heater and it kind of circulates, okay. We've got the oxygen in there, we've got the ammonia in there, nutrients are added, and the mycoprotein broth is drawn off. You can see we've got a couple of taps there where we can draw off that broth, okay? And if you need to pause, pause now. So in order to maximise profit, as we've talked about a lot in this topic, we talked about it when we were looking at factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis in B4 as well. We need to regulate temperature, done by that heater. We need to regulate pH by substances they put in to maintain the pH, and adding that oxygen repeatedly so that there's always a supply. And we know that when the fusarium is respiring aerobically, that's going to produce carbon dioxide, and you can see that that carbon dioxide comes off the top here. We don't want the pressure building up, so that's allowed to escape at the top there. And it says that the fungus doubles its mass every 5 hours. Okay, we've got that word optimum. Okay, perfect growing conditions achieved by controlling all of these different aspects of the fermenter. If you need to pause, pause now. Okay, 6 weeks later, the fermenter is drained and the remaining broth of the remaining broth and cleaned and sterilised. So they clean it all up, ready for the next batch. Okay, if you need to pause, pause now. And then what happens next is the broth from the fermenter is heated. It's heated to 65 degrees C, not an important temperature. You do not need to know that one. It destroys the RNA in the fungus, but again, you don't need to really know that. You just need to know that it's heated so that it's safe for human consumption. If you need to pause, pause now. And the final bit, we've got the mixture. Mixture is spun in a centrifuge. If you remember back in B2 when we talked about the structure of blood, I talked about how we could separate blood into the separate components by spinning it in something called a centrifuge. You might have seen it in kind of like a, I don't know, science program of some kind, or a film or TV or whatever. And they put these tubes into this spinning machine and they put them all in an angle, and it spins really fast, and all of the dense material goes to the bottom and the less dense material goes to the top. And what that does is it stops it being just this kind of broth, and it turns it into a paste, because you can just drain off the liquid off the top. It's a paste, it's pale yellow, smells a bit like mushrooms, and then to make it more appealing to people, it's flavoured and shaped into the bacony type shape or the chicken nugget shape or whatever it might be, okay? And the benefit of Mycoprotein is that there's no use of animals. It's very quick. 6 weeks is a lot quicker than waiting for cows to grow and all that kind of thing. Not much energy to supply to produce it. Better for the environment, not producing any greenhouse gases. No methane, no carbon dioxide. So, I mean, I think we've kind of had this debate, haven't we? And we hear this sometimes in the news about more people becoming vegetarian or vegan. Where I think really, if you want to be vegetarian or vegan, fair play, great, go for it. But I think there's a bigger impact to be said, and this is what I've tended to do, is to say I'm just going to eat a bit less meat. And that's doing my bit for the environment. So rather than just going, you know, the whole hog, so to speak, and say, right, well, I'm not going to eat any meat at all. Maybe we could just say, okay, well, I'm only going to eat meat in, say, 3 meals a week or something like that. And then if we all do our little bit, which is more sustainable in terms of my motivation, I can do that knowing that I can still have meat sometimes, could actually have a bigger impact than just a few people going vegan or vegetarian. But anyway, right, let's move on and see where we go to next. Oh, I don't know how to make it. Yeah, I do. Okay, so advantages and disadvantages of Mycoprotein. Just started talking about this, didn't I? Okay, so suitable for vegetarians, sounds like an advantage. Production requires little land, good one. Can occasionally cause allergic reactions. If you know that's the case, then I suppose you eat something different. Not everyone likes the taste or the texture. Sometimes it's not always that meat-like, and it depends, are you having it because you want something that resembles meat, or are you having it just because you don't want to eat meat and you don't really like the taste and texture of meat, in which case probably, you know, Mycoprotein is there to try and simulate what meat's like. Setup and running costs are high. High in protein but low in fat. That sounds like a good feature. So we've got some advantages and disadvantages there. Pause the PowerPoint again to get those down. Sorry that this one seems to be going on quite a long time, but rest assured it is the end of the topic after this lesson, so that's good. We're nearly at the end, okay? So if you need to pause now. And here we go to the final slide. This was our kind of summary of the whole process. We might have started mapping this out on a double page in our book. So the substances fed into the fermenter are glucose for growth, oxygen for respiration, nitrogen for proteins. That was building up those amino acids that then build up to make proteins. The purpose of the large fermenter is to make Mycoprotein a vegetarian alternative to meat. For example, corn. Oh, I did spell it correctly. The fungus used is Fusarium. 3 conditions that must be kept at their optimum level are temperature, pH and oxygen. The process is aerobic because oxygen is used in aerobic respiration. The process is batch. This means no product is ready for 6 weeks and then the process is repeated. So it's all removed, all sterilised and then repeated. And once the Mycoprotein is removed, it's heated to remove RNA, which can cause gout. It's centrifuged and then flavoured. So there we go. We are at the end of B7, most of which has been taught through distance learning. Hopefully I've delivered it in the same way that I would at school. And hopefully you understand it just as well. Hopefully, if you, I'm using the word hopefully a lot here, but if there's bits that you don't get, then maybe you could go back and you could do some extra revision of those, okay? So I've got a couple of revision PowerPoints that I've made into videos going through the flashcards, which you've had now, and those will be available to watch at the end of this week, and we're going to go for 4 lessons of revision, and then we will have an educate test, okay? Hope you have, by the way, pause now if you still need extra time. Hope you're enjoying the lessons. Please do hit subscribe. Only about 10% of the views that I get are people who've subscribed. You will see that I add more things. There's loads of stuff you can get involved in terms of revising for paper 1. So I would really appreciate it if you did subscribe. Make me feel better in terms of putting all this energy into making the videos, which I already did before because I love doing it. Okay, hope you're getting the best out of this. That is my intention, for you to understand biology and love biology in the same way that I do. Anyway, I'm rabbiting on now. It's 30 minutes, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye.